Welcome to True Crime Threads, where we unravel the darkest secrets behind scandalous crimes. In today's story, we delve into the fatal affair of a wealthy Texas wife and her young lover, an obsession that turned deadly. In the affluent suburbs of Dallas, Texas, Clara Winthrop appeared to have it all. Married to Henry Winthrop, a successful oil magnate, she lived in a sprawling estate surrounded by perfectly manicured gardens. Her days were filled with luxurious outings, charity events, and afternoons spent with other wealthy socialites. With her impeccable fashion sense, radiant beauty, and composed demeanor, Clara was the embodiment of sophistication. She seemed to glide effortlessly through life, her every move admired by those around her. But behind the closed doors of her grand mansion, Clara's life was far from the fairy tale it seemed. Her marriage to Henry had long lost its spark. While he provided her with every material comfort imaginable, their relationship had become one of convenience rather than affection. Henry, 10 years her senior, was devoted to his business and often spent long hours at work, leaving Clara alone in their cavernous home. Their conversations had dwindled to polite exchanges, and the passion they once shared was now a distant memory. Clara tried to convince herself that she should be content. She had everything most people could only dream of: wealth, status, and security. Yet a persistent emptiness gnawed at her. She felt as though she was merely playing a role in a carefully staged production, her true self hidden beneath the glittering surface. The loneliness and lack of fulfillment were overwhelming, and Clara began to crave something more: a spark, a sense of excitement to fill the void in her heart. Her world took an unexpected turn one afternoon at the exclusive country club where she often spent her time. It was there that she met Evan Carter, a 24-year-old bartender with striking good looks and an air of youthful confidence. Evan was unlike anyone in her social circle. His carefree demeanor and easy charm stood in stark contrast to the polished, reserved men she usually encountered. Clara found herself drawn to him, intrigued by his energy and captivated by the way he seemed to genuinely see her, not just the role she played. What began as harmless flirtation quickly escalated. Their encounters grew more frequent, and Clara found herself looking for excuses to visit the club just to see Evan. The stolen glances and quiet conversations awakened something in her that had long been dormant. Before she knew it, they were meeting in secret, sneaking away to secluded spots where they could be alone. For Clara, the affair was intoxicating, a thrilling escape from the monotony of her life. But as the bond between them deepened, she failed to see the danger looming on the horizon. What felt like a revival of her spirit would soon lead her down a path of betrayal and tragedy. Evan Carter was unlike anyone Clara Winthrop had ever encountered. His youthful exuberance, raw ambition, and magnetic charm filled the void in her life, and their affair quickly became the most exhilarating part of her days. What began as stolen moments of passion soon turned into a consuming obsession for Evan. While Clara treated their relationship as an escape from her unfulfilling marriage, Evan saw it as the beginning of something much deeper. He didn't just want Clara's attention, he wanted all of her. At first, Evan's devotion flattered Clara. The way he spoke of their future together, his relentless declarations of love, and the small gifts he brought her all made her feel desired in a way she hadn't felt in years. But as time went on, his affection began to take on a darker tone. Clara started to notice how he grew irritable when she couldn't meet him or when she had to cancel their plans. He questioned her about her marriage, asking when she would leave Henry and why she continued to stay in a relationship she claimed was devoid of love. Clara, aware of the risks involved, tried to temper Evan's expectations. She explained that her life was complicated, that leaving Henry wasn't a simple decision. She had to think about her reputation, her financial stability, and the potential fallout from a public scandal. But Evan didn't seem to care about the complexities of her life. He only cared about the promises he believed she had made, the future he had envisioned for them. Evan's behavior became increasingly erratic. He began texting her incessantly, demanding to know where she was and whom she was with. If she didn't respond immediately, he bombarded her with messages, each one more desperate than the last. On one occasion, he even showed up uninvited at a boutique where Clara was shopping with friends. Though he acted casual, the look in his eyes told Clara that he had been keeping track of her movements. The intensity of Evan's obsession unnerved her. Clara tried to pull back, creating more distance between them, but Evan resisted. He would alternate between pleading with her to stay and threatening to expose their affair if she left. Each time she tried to end things, he found a way to manipulate her into staying, using her fears against her. Clara's once thrilling escape had become a suffocating trap. She began to realize the extent of Evan's fixation, but by then she felt powerless to stop it. The life she had sought to escape now seemed safer than the dangerous web of lies and desperation that her affair had become. Evan's love was no longer intoxicating, it was dangerous, and Clara knew she was playing a game she could not win. One afternoon, Clara Winthrop returned home to find an unmarked envelope waiting for her on the marble entry table. Inside were several photographs of her and Evan together, candid shots of them entering a hotel, laughing at an outdoor cafe, and exchanging an intimate glance in her car. Along with the photos was a single handwritten note that chilled her to the core: choose me or lose everything. Clara's heart pounded as she scanned the images again. She realized, with a sinking dread, that someone had been watching them for weeks. Her first thought was of Evan. His recent behavior had been erratic, and his possessiveness was spiraling out of control. Clara knew he was desperate to hold on to her, but this act was a new level of boldness. The calculated delivery of the photos felt like a deliberate move to corner her. The message was clear: her life, her marriage, and her reputation were all at risk. Clara's anxiety intensified as the reality of her situation sank in. She had spent years cultivating the image of a perfect wife and socialite, and the idea of her affair being exposed terrified her. The consequences would be catastrophic. Henry, powerful and well-connected, would not only divorce her but also ensure she was ostracized from their elite social circle. The scandal would make her a pariah, leaving her with nothing. In a state of panic, Clara sought advice from Victoria, her oldest and most trusted friend. Over coffee at a secluded cafe, Clara confided in her, revealing the affair and the envelope of photos. Victoria listened intently, her expression a mix of shock and concern. She warned Clara that Evan's behavior was escalating into dangerous territory. "You need to cut ties immediately," Victoria said. "This man isn't just reckless, he's unstable." But Clara knew it wasn't that simple. Evan had leverage now, and she felt trapped. In a desperate attempt to de-escalate the situation, Clara decided to confront Evan. She drove to his modest apartment on the outskirts of Dallas that evening, clutching the envelope tightly in her hands. When Evan opened the door, she wasted no time. She demanded to know why he had sent the photos and begged him to stop. Evan's reaction was a mix of anger and desperation. He denied sending the photos but didn't deny knowing about them. He accused Clara of betraying him, insisting that he wouldn't let her walk away. His words were laced with menace, and for the first time Clara saw a side of him that truly frightened her. As she left his apartment that night, Clara realized she was in over her head. Evan wasn't just a fleeting mistake or a temporary distraction, he had become a threat to her safety and her carefully constructed life. Every move she made now would have to be calculated, but deep down, Clara feared that there was no way out. The charity gala at the country club was supposed to be a glamorous evening, a brief respite from the turmoil consuming Clara Winthrop's life. She arrived on Henry's arm, dressed in an elegant gown that shimmered under the soft glow of the chandeliers. From the outside, she looked every bit the perfect wife and socialite, smiling politely and engaging in small talk. But beneath her poised exterior, Clara was unraveling. The weight of her affair with Evan and the threats he posed were a constant shadow, even in moments like this. As the evening progressed, Clara mingled with other guests, trying to keep her composure. But her calm facade cracked when her eyes fell upon a familiar figure. Standing near the bar, Evan Carter was unmistakable. His confident smirk and casual stance set him apart from the finely dressed crowd. He didn't belong here, and his presence sent a jolt of panic through Clara. She quickly turned away, her pulse racing. How had he managed to infiltrate her world? Clara knew Evan wasn't there by coincidence. His presence was deliberate, a calculated move to remind her that he could disrupt her life at any moment. For the rest of the evening, she avoided his gaze, but she felt his eyes following her, a constant reminder of the danger looming over her. Later that night, after the gala ended and Clara and Henry returned home, Clara found a note tucked under the windshield wiper of her car. The handwriting was unmistakable Evan's. The message was short but chilling. Meet me at the lake house tonight. Don't make me come to you. Clara's blood ran cold. The lake house was one of Henry's properties, a secluded retreat far from prying eyes. She knew she had no choice but to go. If Evan was bold enough to show up at the gala, she couldn't risk him coming to her home, where Henry might confront him. Under the cover of darkness, Clara drove to the lake house, her hands gripping the steering wheel tightly. When she arrived, the house was eerily quiet, its windows glowing faintly in the moonlight. Evan was already there, pacing on the porch. The confrontation was immediate and heated. Evan accused Clara of leading him on, of making promises she had no intention of keeping. Clara tried to calm him, pleading with him to leave her alone and offering him money to start over. But Evan's anger boiled over. He shouted that if he couldn't have her, no one would. The situation spiraled out of control. In a desperate attempt to defend herself, Clara grabbed a heavy marble statue from a nearby table and struck Evan. He collapsed to the ground, motionless. Horrified, Clara stood frozen, her breath coming in ragged gasps as she realized the irreversible act she had just committed. The man who had once made her feel alive now lay lifeless at her feet. Clara Winthrop stared at Evan's motionless body on the floor, her mind spinning in disbelief. The stillness of the lake house was deafening, broken only by the sound of her own rapid breathing. Panic surged through her veins as the gravity of her actions began to sink in. She hadn't meant for this to happen, she had only wanted to protect herself. But now Evan Carter was dead, and she was left to deal with the consequences of her desperate act. Her first instinct was to call the police, but the thought of an investigation terrified her. The affair, the threats, and the confrontation would all come to light. Her carefully curated life would be destroyed, and Henry would undoubtedly abandon her in the wake of the scandal. Clara knew she couldn't let that happen. She had to find a way to cover her tracks and make sure no one ever discovered what had taken place at the lake house. Clara forced herself to move, her hands trembling as she searched the house for anything that could help her. She found a pair of gloves in a storage closet and put them on before dragging Evan's body to the back door. The lake stretched out in front of her, its dark waters reflecting the moonlight. Clara knew it was her only option. With every ounce of strength she had, she rolled Evan's body into a small rowboat tied to the dock. The journey across the lake felt like an eternity. Clara's arms ached as she rowed, the boat cutting through the still water. Her mind raced with fear and regret, but she couldn't allow herself to falter. When she reached the middle of the lake, she paused, staring down at Evan's lifeless form. A lump formed in her throat, but she swallowed it down. There was no turning back now. Clara tied weights from the boat's storage compartment to Evan's body, and, with a final push, sent him over the edge. The splash echoed through the silence, and she watched as the water consumed him, the ripples slowly fading until the surface was calm once more. Exhausted and shaken, Clara returned to the lake house to clean up. She scrubbed every surface she had touched, disposed of the gloves, and ensured there was no trace of Evan's presence. As dawn approached, she drove home, her hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles turned white. In the days that followed, Clara went about her life as though nothing had happened, but the weight of her actions was unbearable. She jumped at every sound, expecting the police to show up at her door. And then, weeks later, the news broke. Evan Carter's body had been discovered by a fisherman. The investigation into his death was underway, and Clara's world began to crumble once again.